The people who say, Sophie Cunningham, she shoots those three-pointers, makes them look like free throws.
I'm like, good. That's what I get paid to do. I should.
You do get paid.
Barely, but we're still surviving.
There is a moment in every organizational crisis when the whispers stop being whispers. When the carefully managed public narrative collides with a documented, undeniable reality that no press conference spin, no carefully worded statement, and no amount of institutional deflection can contain anymore. When the people who have been watching closely, tracking the patterns, time-stamping the substitutions, rewinding the post-game press conferences, stop asking questions and start demanding answers. The Indiana fever has arrived at that moment, and the fuse that finally brought everything to the surface was not a loss, not a trade demand, not a locker room leak through an anonymous source. It was a player from another team, a veteran with nothing to hide and no reason to soften her words, going on record about what is actually happening inside this league around Caitlyn Clark. Sophie Cunningham does not play political games. She never has. When asked about her three-point shooting, she does not give you the humble deflection or the rehearsed humility. She gives you the honest answer. I'm like, good. It's what I get paid to do. I should. That is the energy. That is the voice. And when a player with that kind of unapologetic directness decides to go on record about the environment surrounding the most important player in women's basketball right now, people do not scroll past it. They stop, they share it, they clip it, and they send it to every person they know who has been watching the Indiana fever with growing unease. Because what Cunningham has said, combined with what Clark's performance numbers and body language are communicating inside that fever locker room, is painting a picture that the Indiana Fever front office is absolutely not prepared to address publicly. The word fans are using is not disappointment. It is not frustration. It is betrayal. To understand why this situation has reached its current boiling point, you have to go back to the Washington Mystics game. Not just the game itself, but specifically what happened in the minutes after it ended. Clark delivered one of the most electric individual fourth-quarter performances in WNBA history. 5 three-pointers from logo range, 17 points in 9 minutes. A single-handed attempt to drag her team back from a deficit that had the entire arena on its feet convinced the comeback was happening. Washington looked terrified. Every Clark possession felt like a countdown to something devastating. The crowd was loud, alive, and fully invested in watching something historic unfold in real time. 5 of 7 from 3, 17 points, 9 minutes. One of the greatest individual quarter performances this league has ever seen. And then the game ended. The cameras turned to head coach Stephanie White. A reporter asked her directly about Clark's performance. What happened next is the moment that lit the internet on fire and has not stopped burning since. I thought our whole group showed resilience. The whole group. That is the response to a historic individual performance. 5 threes in 9 minutes from a player who personally kept her team in a game they had no business still being in. And the coach's response is to talk about the whole group. She could not say the name. She would not say the name. Then within 60 seconds of that response, the same reporter asked about Kelsey Mitchell's performance. Mitchell, who had gone 0 for 7 from the field in the first half. Mitchell, who had contributed 4 points before halftime while Clark was the only thing keeping the offense functional. Stephanie White's response to the question about Mitchell? Speechless. She put us on her back. Speechless for the player who went 0 for 7 in the first half. Not even a specific compliment, not even a name spoken with genuine admiration, for the player who delivered one of the most efficient and devastating fourth-quarter shooting exhibitions in recent WNBA memory. The comparison was clipped and shared before White even left the podium. Social media did not miss it. The fans who had been watching closely, tracking the pattern, documenting the rotation decisions, recognized it immediately as part of something larger than a single awkward press conference. Because the post-game framing is a symptom. The in-game rotation decisions are the disease. Here is what has been documented across multiple games by fans who have been paying very close attention. Clark hits back-to-back threes. The momentum builds. The crowd comes alive. The defense starts to scramble because there is no answer for a shooter at Clark's level when she has found her rhythm and the floor is spread around her. And then the substitution comes. The timeout is called. The rotation takes the ball out of Clark's hands at exactly the moment her shooting rhythm has reached its peak. Is this deliberate? Is Stephanie White consciously interrupting Clark's momentum to prevent her from becoming too dominant in any single stretch? Or is it standard coaching, managing minutes, running a rotation, trying to give the defense a breather? A single game cannot answer that question. 2 games cannot answer it either. But when fans begin documenting this pattern across an entire season stretch, when they start timestamping every substitution that arrives immediately after a Clark scoring run, when the frequency becomes statistically undeniable, the standard coaching explanation begins to strain against the weight of the evidence. And the numbers that emerge from Clark's rest stretches are not subtle. The team stops scoring, not slows down, stops. The offensive engine that makes Indiana dangerous, the pace, the floor spacing, the threat of a deep three on any possession, disappears the moment Clark leaves the floor. And when she returns, often to a deficit that did not exist when she left, she has to spend the first several possessions rebuilding the rhythm that the rotation interrupted. That is not a theory. That is a documented performance gap that any honest coaching evaluation has to address directly, and it connects to the broader question that every Fever fan is now asking out loud. Why does the coaching staff keep interrupting what is clearly working? Enter Sophie Cunningham. Because the Stephanie White story does not exist in isolation from league history. It connects directly to a documented past that Cunningham has been willing to describe publicly in a way that almost no active WNBA player has matched. Cunningham is not a fringe voice operating from the edges of the conversation. She is a Phoenix Mercury starter, a respected veteran, a player whose public profile has been built entirely on her refusal to give the league the sanitized, PR-approved responses it prefers. When she speaks about the environment around Caitlyn Clark, about the old guard's reaction to Clark's arrival, about the institutional jealousy that has shaped how this league has treated its biggest star, she is speaking from a place of direct observation and genuine conviction. What she has described is a coordinated campaign, not just tough competition, not just the natural adjustment period that any transformative player experiences when they arrive in a new league. A deliberate, organized effort by certain established voices and certain coaching staffs to go out of their way to make an example of the new player, to ensure that Clark understood who held the institutional power in this league, and that dominating it would not come without consequences. The coaching staff that Cunningham's description most directly maps onto, the one that most clearly embodied everything she described about the old guard's response to Clark's arrival, was Stephanie White's Connecticut Sun. Go back to that playoff series. Go back to what White's team did to Clark during those games. The defensive strategy was not just competitive. It was described by observers as organized, relentless, and at times genuinely dangerous. A coordinated campaign disguised as a defensive philosophy. And the person who stood on the sidelines directing that campaign, arms crossed, watching her players execute a strategy designed to break Clark's rhythm physically and mentally before she could establish herself as the dominant force she was already becoming, was Stephanie White. That same person now runs Clark's daily practice. That same person decides Clark's rotation minutes. That same person stands at the postgame podium and finds language for every player in the building except the one who delivered a historically efficient fourth-quarter performance. The player on the receiving end of that playoff strategy is now being asked to take direction from the person who designed it. Every day, in film sessions, in timeout huddles, in the moments immediately following historic performances when all she receives is a reference to the whole group's resilience. That is the reality Caitlyn Clark is navigating inside the Indiana Fever organization right now. The word boycott gets thrown around constantly in sports fan discourse. Social media has a documented history of calling for economic action, and then watching the same frustrated fans show up anyway because the love of the game outlasts the anger at the institution. Boycott calls typically generate noise and produce very little actual economic impact. This situation is different. And the numbers are beginning to show it. 1,600 empty seats, in a building that has been selling out consistently because of one player. 1,600 people who purchased tickets, made plans, and then made a deliberate choice not to show up. That is not a weather issue or a scheduling conflict. That is a documented, wallet-level decision by a significant portion of the fan base to express their dissatisfaction with the direction of the franchise. Those 1,600 empty seats represent something specific and important. They represent the casual, newly converted audience that Clark brought to this league, not the fans with 25 years of WNBA loyalty holding them in place when the product stops delivering. The fans who arrived because of Clark specifically, who follow Clark specifically, and who will make their economic decisions based on whether the product around Clark reflects the value of the player they came to watch. And those fans are watching every rotation, every post-game comment, every substitution that arrives immediately after a back-to-back three-point shooting display, and they are making decisions accordingly. The front office has to understand what that empty seat number actually means. Not as a bad night, not as an outlier, but as an early signal of a larger trend that will accelerate if the organizational response remains silence and deflection. The Fire Stephanie White sentiment has been framed repeatedly as emotional overreaction, as passionate fans who cannot separate their love for Clark from their ability to evaluate coaching decisions with any objectivity. That framing is both condescending and inaccurate. The fans are not asking for anything complicated. The demands are simple, and they are based entirely on what the on-court evidence shows. Play faster. Trust Clark. Let her dictate the offensive tempo. Stop interrupting her rhythm at its peak. These are not the demands of people who do not understand basketball. They are the observations of millions of viewers who have watched this team play enough games to clearly see the difference between when Indiana follows those principles and when it does not. When Indiana plays fast, when Clark controls the tempo, when the floor is spread and every possession carries the threat of a deep three or an impossible pass that creates an open look, this team is genuinely terrifying. The crowd is electric, opponents panic and make mistakes. The transition opportunities are everywhere. That version of Indiana has the talent and the offensive ceiling to compete with anyone in this league. That version disappears the moment the pace slows, the moment Clark comes off the floor. The moment the offensive philosophy shifts from trusting the superstar to managing the superstar. The fans chose their leader the moment she walked into this league and transformed it commercially, culturally, and competitively in a single season. They are watching that leader's historic performances get deflected into discussions about the whole group's collective resilience. They are watching her momentum get interrupted at its highest points. They are responding the only way fans ultimately can when the institution stops listening to words. They are staying home. The Indiana Fever front office made a decision when they hired Stephanie White. That decision was made with full awareness of the playoff history between White's Connecticut Sun and Caitlyn Clark. Full awareness of the defensive strategy that defined that series. Full awareness of what Sophie Cunningham and others were already saying publicly about the institutional environment around Clark. They made the hire anyway. The question they now have to answer, not for the fans, not for the media, not for the social media audience that has been demanding a response since the Washington game post-game conference, is one they have to answer for themselves. Do they understand what they have? Do they understand that the player sitting in their locker room, the one delivering historically efficient fourth-quarter performances while her coaching staff discusses the whole group's resilience, is the kind of athlete that franchises spend decades hoping to attract and almost never actually get? Do they understand that the commercial transformation of this league, the sellout arenas on the road, the television ratings competing with the NBA on certain nights, the merchandise numbers, the sponsorship interest, the mainstream cultural conversation that has finally started treating women's basketball as something worth covering seriously, all of it traces directly back to one player's arrival? Do they understand that the fans driving those numbers are not WNBA loyalists in the traditional sense? They are Clark loyalists. They follow Clark. And if Clark's relationship with this franchise deteriorates to the point where she makes different choices when her contract creates an opportunity to make them, those fans follow Clark to wherever she goes next. That is not a threat. That is a documented commercial reality that the entire league already witnessed play out during Clark's arrival. The franchises that got her on the road experienced it. The television networks carrying the games experienced it. The sponsors writing checks experienced it. The Indiana Fever front office needs to decide, with urgency and clarity, whether they are going to protect the asset they were fortunate enough to have fall into their laps, or whether they are going to continue managing the situation with the kind of passive institutional deflection that fills 1,700 empty seats and turns longtime advocates into public critics. Here is where everything lands. Sophie Cunningham is barely surviving financially in a league that still does not pay its players what their talent and commercial value actually warrant. She said it herself, without embarrassment, without bitterness, with the same directness she brings to every honest observation she makes publicly. You know, barely, but we're still surviving, still shooting. Still calling out the jealousy and the institutional resistance and the coordinated campaign against the player who has done more for the growth of this league in 18 months than anything the old guard produced in the decade before her arrival. And somewhere in an Indiana Fever locker room, Caitlyn Clark is watching every one of these developments. She is watching the post-game press conferences. She is watching the rotation decisions. She is watching the social media response to what is being documented about the environment around her. And she is making the kind of quiet, private assessments that eventually, when the contract window opens and the organizational loyalty calculus gets reevaluated, become very public decisions that franchises spend years recovering from. The Indiana Fever has a window. It is not permanent, and it is not getting wider. Every post-game press conference where a historic performance gets absorbed into language about the whole group makes it slightly smaller. Every substitution that arrives precisely when Clark's rhythm has reached its peak makes it smaller. Every empty seat that represents a Clark loyalist who decided the product was no longer worth showing up for makes it smaller. The talent is there. The star is there. The commercial engine, the fan base, the cultural moment, the opportunity to build something genuinely historic around the most important player women's basketball has ever seen. All of it is sitting inside that Indiana Fever locker room right now. What is missing is the organizational alignment around a player who has already proven, beyond any reasonable statistical or commercial doubt, that she can transform a franchise, a league, and a sport if the people making decisions around her would simply get out of her way and let her do it. The fans are not going to stop watching. The social media conversation is not going to stop generating pressure. Sophie Cunningham is not going to stop telling the truth. And Caitlyn Clark is not going to stop delivering the kind of performances that make the institutional resistance around her look smaller and more calculated every single time it surfaces. The Indiana Fever front office has to decide what side of this story they want to be on. The side that recognized what it had and protected it, or the side that had everything and chose the wrong hill to defend. The window is open. The clock is running. And 1,600 empty seats are just the beginning of what comes next if they get this wrong. Drop your comment. Does Caitlyn Clark survive this coaching situation, or does she eventually walk? Stayed locked with my channel, Simply Explained, for more updates.